Joe. It's fantastic to be with you this week. I'm a little happy on my side of the podcast, of course, after last week's big predictions on the golf tournament. But maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, though. Did want to welcome you to today's recording. And just to remind the audience, my name is Fraser Cobbe. I'm the executive director of a number of the county medical societies and specialty societies in Florida. And I'll have Joe introduce himself, and then when we come back, maybe I'll do a little bit of gloating on my lap of honor for my prediction from last week's Masters. So Joe, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Joe Daraskevich, and I work alongside Fraser at several societies across the state of Florida. And each week we get together and we kind of talk about what's happened over in Tallahassee as far as healthcare headlines go. So, Fraser, I do congratulate you. So go ahead and tell everybody what we're if they're just tuning in this week, what are we gloating about here?
Yeah, other than the news outside of tariffs, of course, there was some other big news going on in Masters tournament, and we had some fun predictions last week as far as our picks to win the tournament and our dark horses. I don't think either of our dark horses did very well,
Well,
but
they both
good.
made the cut. Let's just say that. So
That's
they got to
something.
play the weekend, which when you're picking dark horses, a lot of times they can fall off pretty easy. So anyway, the winners, I picked Bryson DeChambeau, who was in the final group. But tell everybody who you picked.
And I had Rory McIlroy, of course, who had a stunning, I guess, flop at the end, but then a comeback there in overtime and the first hole of the playoff to win his green jacket and do the what career sweep now. He's won all four of the majors.
Yeah, and people will say, okay, Frazier picked, Rory McIlroy. He's a top pick for every tournament. But I mean, it's been I think 12 years since he won his last major, and he's never won the Masters before. So kind of a dark horse if you're going to be selecting, one of the top picks. So congratulations to Frazier. I owe you a pint next time we see each other. And but it's one of those things where I was rooting for him too. He's a crowd favorite, and it's good to see him win that career Grand Slam. So congratulations to Frazier. Congratulations to Rory McIlroy as well.
Absolutely. And we are recording this, so I'll remind you about that pint later on.
That's right. That's right. I don't mind. I don't mind. I'm sure Rory's had a few pints since putting that green jacket on for the first time. All right. Well, without further ado, I know everyone's excited about the golf tournament and the finish, but I think they're also excited about our three headlines that we touch on each week. Lot going on. Like we said a few weeks ago, we're kind of in the back half now, and things that need to happen, and kind of some other important things are going to be left on the sidelines. So you ready to jump right into our three headlines for the week?
Yeah, let's get right into them.
All right, here we go. And well, like we do every week, we'll kind of take comments at the bottom of the in the comment section, and kind of let you guys know, because I did talk to some people last week who were excited about these recordings, and they were actually going over to Tallahassee. So let us know what's important to you guys, and we'll touch on it when we can. So anyway, jumping into the first one, another week and acrimony between the governor and the House deepens. Will Live Healthy funding be impacted, Fraser?
Yeah, we touched on this last week, Joe, about the ongoing skirmish, if you will, between the House leadership and the governor's office, and that did not abate last week. If nothing else, it probably got a little bit more tense. And actually, the comment you received from a couple of the doctors going over to Tallahassee this week kind of weaves into this headline as well. There's a lot of discussion about budget issues. As some discussion in the committee meetings last week about agency heads and potentially some funding issues that have risen to the surface as well. There's also some discussion about the House trying to undo several bills that the legislature has passed in recent years, a number of them dealing with tort issues. So there's some bills moving through the session that we've touched on throughout these weekly podcasts, talking about one way's attorneys' fees. There's been some PIP discussion as well. And the governor came out last week saying that it seems like the House is trying to undo a number of the measures that the Florida legislature has done over the last few years. The Florida House itself is talking about the funding concerns they have, where what was a rosy outlook for the state of Florida budget, and predicting, sorry, a $2 billion surplus. Next year, it turns into a $7 billion surplus in 2 years from now. So the House is like, we need to start tightening our belt a little bit. We've passed some priorities, specifically Senate priorities, the last couple years on live healthy, um, and some housing support as well. I think live local was the term they used on that bill 2 years ago. So they're going to try and remove potentially some funding. Live healthy, of course, that was a big victory last year for physician workforce in the state, where Florida was going to invest a lot of money in loan forgiveness and increasing numbers of residency slots and other things to address physician workforce shortages. So we're going to be paying attention to the budget debate, as we've talked about, trying to see if the House and Senate can agree on cutting some of those priorities. What's interesting is last year's Senate President Pasadomo is still in the Senate serving. She's no longer president, but obviously she's not going to want to see some of her priorities cut as far as funding goes. And the comments around the governor's office, he actually called out some of the tort expansion bills that are moving through session over on the House side that aren't moving on the Senate. But again, issues we've talked about before, wrongful death expansions, the sovereign immunity bill, which again, it was the bill that you talked locally with some of the doctors there about their concern. The good thing about that is, the original House bill was going to increase the limits for government entities up to $1 million. There was an amendment passed last week on the House side that would lower that increase to 600,000. It's still a concern, but I think they're trying to position themselves to be a little bit in a better shape for the Senate to potentially consider that legislation as well. So there's a lot going on. There's lots of butting heads between the leadership of the House and the governor's office. It's going to be really interesting to see if they can pull it all together, and what bills and what funding ends up, kind of on the shop room floor, if you will, after all of this, and not being, successful going through the process this year.
Well, and it is interesting. Obviously, we got together last year and did these weekly updates as well. And we talked about Live Healthy, I think, every single week. It was always something new was popping up with Live Healthy. And then even afterward, it was an election year last year, a lot of the people that were speaking to physicians were kind of, that was a feather in their cap, as they went forward. Hey, we did all these, priorities for the healthcare industry. And now I mean, is that pretty common that you have something that was a feather in people's cap the year before, and then it's kind of back on the discussion board the next following year? Is that a common occurrence?
Not usually, but the budget projection is kind of pushing some of that. But it does seem now that the House is poking the Senate in addition to poking the governor. So obviously the budget is large. They can look many places when they're looking for savings. But interesting, they are looking at a couple of those priorities. Again, those priorities were passed and a lot of funding added at a time where both the state budget projection was much rosier than it is now. So you understand why the House is concerned about it, but it's where they're looking for savings. And what we care about is organized medicine. And if they are going to gouge some of those programs that we think are going to be successful in helping, expand access to physician care in the state of Florida as well.
Yeah. So it's going to be an important topic the rest of this session, and we'll keep an eye on all those numbers and the budget in general, and let people know if anything does fall off. We'll keep you guys in the loop. Moving on to the second headline today. Could strict timelines for providing access to medical records be on the horizon, Fraser?
Yeah, and at the county medical society level, we get quite a few phone calls from patients trying to access medical records. Usually it's from physicians that have retired and have, closed their office, and patients are wondering where to find those. So there are requirements for physicians to make medical records available to patients upon request, whether you're still maintaining your practice or if you retire and move on and into retirement. But currently, the Florida statutes just say you have to provide those records within a reasonable amount of time, and it's not defined. The bills that are moving this year would place a 10-day or 14-day requirement on a physician's office to reply to a medical records request. In addition, it would also say that they have to comply with the mechanism that's being requested. So they couldn't just drop everything to paper and send them a paper copy. If the requester says, here's a web link, I want you to upload records to this link, they have to do that. If they want an external file shared in another mechanism, they have to comply with the method as requested by the patient or the patient's representative. So what would seem like somewhat of a not a major deal when you talk about a physician workflow having no strict timelines in there of 10 and 14 days and the ramifications that will come about if you don't adhere to those. It's a little bit worrisome. So there was some really good debate on that bill last week in the Senate. They held it over for another week. We'll see if the Rules Committee addresses some of those concerns next week as well. But we'll be watching out for it, because certainly our doctors will need to be aware aware if there is a strict timeline. What is a legal request for that patient record, and what will start the clock ticking for them to comply with that request too. All that is going to matter in the final details here.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. A lot of the topics that we talk about impact both the physician population and the patient population. So it's one of those where you can kind of see where they're coming at from both sides. And obviously, it's an important issue that everyone's wanted to get their medical records and things like that. But we need to know how what the laws are and everything. So it's a very important thing that we keep track of.
Yeah, and so there's a bit of legal twist in there too as well, because it allows legal representatives of patients as well. So it may be an attorney's office that's reaching out on behalf of a patient to an office. So there can be, again, some legal ramifications for when and how you comply with those requests that bear watching for sure. And again, that bill still has a long way to go. But it is kind of far down the path on the Senate side, as well as the House. So it is one that has some momentum. So we're going to watch and probably report back to you guys on in the coming weeks.
Yep, and like we say each week now, the clock is ticking, and it's that time is getting smaller and smaller every week that we move on. So things need to happen if they're going to happen. So we'll keep an eye on that and let you know if it dies on the vine, if it keeps going. But stay tuned. I guess we should stay on that one. You ready to move on to the third?
Absolutely.
All right, the third headline today: positive amendment enacted in the Senate would make sure patients have a right to receive a paper prescription. What are we gonna? What's the latest with that one?
Yeah, so we chatted a little bit about this bill probably 2 weeks ago, I think, if I'm recalling properly. Probably went too far in the weeds on that one last time. The good thing is the amendment that was filed on the Senate side this week does give a patient a right to request a written prescription. So if you recall, our concern is if physicians are forced to do everything electronically, there are some specific situations with hard to access drugs or situations where pharmacists may not have a medication in stock. Um, that a patient may want to request that written paper script to be able to take it and shop it around, if you will, or take it to any pharmacy that may actually have that in stock. So the good thing is this amendment does preserve patients' rights to request a written prescription. It does say it would have to be documented in the medical record that the patient did specifically ask for a written prescription, but thankfully the Senate has heard our concerns on that, and they are going to maintain that pathway for written prescriptions to be provided, which we think is important. Of course, it makes the language on the Senate side different from the House side now. So as we've talked before, as you get to the end of session, there's a lot of back and forth between the two chambers because that language has to be mirrored identically, and both chambers have to agree to it if it's going to pass and be sent to the governor. So we'll see with the two different versions now if one chamber is going to hold tight over the other one on that language. But we think it's good public policy. The federal regulations do enable patients to request a written prescription as well. So we think this aligns with the federal regs, and we think it's a good thing for patients.
Well, and that just obviously the topic of making the language mirror each other. That's got to be something that to be a fly on the wall as they're kind of making those slight adjustments as they're getting closer and closer. It's that's got to be stressful if you're the one kind of trying to make that language match exactly each bill.
Yeah, and typically they'll one chamber will decide, the other chamber can kind of play lead on that, and they'll kind of coalesce around one chamber's preference on the language. So I think that's usually what happens. As long as there's a meeting of the minds on a higher level policy, then they can figure out the language below. But this would take a pretty dramatic meeting of the minds, if you will, because one side's going to maintain access to paper records. The other chamber, currently the language says no, none at all. So hopefully the Senate position on this one will play out and win the day for us if this bill is going to pass this year.
Yeah, and that's like you say. Usually it's those little small words, but this one is it's a little harder to get that the language
It's
all together. Yeah,
it's a meaningful language, yes.
right, right. All right, well,
Speak
go.
yes,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
speaking of meaningful, this now time of our weekly podcast where you share your insights into the music industry and give us your recommendations for your song of the week.
Okay, this is a good one too because it's kind of tied back to last week where I was giving a musical recommendation for an artist that I couldn't go see the concert, and this week I'm going to a Wednesday night concert in St. Augustine, right down the road from my house. And the band is it's not my normal band that I like to go see, but their live shows are wildly popular, but there aren't many lyrics. And so the band, again, get your pen ready. I'm going to tell you the spelling of this band, and I think you've heard me talk about this band before, but the pronunciation of this band is Krungbin. So the spelling is Khruangbin. And like I said, there there's not many lyrics. It's more of almost like my wife says it's like elevator music, but I think it's more of like waiting room music. If you have a your practice and you're wanting people to kind of just sit there and calm their nerves and everything, put on some Krungbin. The song I'm gonna suggest today is "So We Won't Forget." So We Won't Forget by Krungbin. Give it a listen, and it's one of those where it's like if you're on the beach, if you're like I said, in a waiting room, you'll really enjoy this band. And it's the thing I really like about them is they're from Texas, so they're not too internationally known, but they were worried about becoming wildly popular so that they wouldn't when they go out in public they'd be autograph seekers and everything. So for their live shows, the guitarist and the bassist, they wear black wigs with bangs in the front. So if you see them on stage, you think of oh, there's Krungbin. They're very, very recognizable mental image, but they're unrecognizable when they go out with the people. So in St. Augustine this week when they're going to be there, I'm picturing them going and seeing the sights and getting to go to the old town and going to all the different restaurants and everything, and nobody knowing who this band is, and then they get on the stage and they have their wigs on, and it'll be fun. So anyway, it's not many lyrics, but think of it as a band that you might want to play in your waiting room as your patients are anxious, if they're thinking about what's going to happen in the doctor's office. Put on some Krungbin and let them enjoy the soothing sounds.
Nice. And let us know the feedback you get from your patients too. That'd be awesome. A little Krungbin recommendations or
Exactly. Well, and I'm excited to hear because it's one of those where you put them on in the car and it kind of mellows you out pretty quick. But I've heard that the live show is really, really phenomenal, and it's a three-piece band. So there's the guitarist and it's a female bassist, same wig as the guitarist, and the guitarist plays both lead guitar and rhythm guitar, and then they just have a drummer. So it's a three-piece band, but the it sounds like about six or seven musicians, but they're good. Trust me. And I'll spell it one more time, real quick. Khruangbin. Krungbin. And the song this week is "So We Won't Forget."
nice. And let's not forget to do this again next week, Joe.
I would never forget. So
You
yeah,
like you like how I did that?
I like you always have a little twist when I give
Uh,
the musical recommendation. So
I try.
we won't forget next week. We'll be back, and we will obviously we'll pick up on some of the topics we talked about this week, and we'll have some more topics for you next week. Let us know if you have anything that you want to know about in the comment section, and Fraser and I will touch on that when we get back together. And we're like we said, the time's running out. We're getting toward the back half here, so. It's a really important time of session to get those things across the finish line. The things that you oppose, hopefully they lose steam. But it's now's the final push. We're going to be seeing some important things happen in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. It's crunch time. Look forward to reporting back to you all next week.
Yep, we sure do. All right, Fraser, it was another good episode, and hopefully the listeners will enjoy listening to Krungbin.
Nice. Thanks, Joe. See you next week.